Hello and good morning and welcome to Morning Brew on Labour Social, back in the UK, back in sunny Durham. It's actually sunny today. We seem to have brought the sun back from Greece with us. Hi to everyone in the chat there. Just wanted to start off today. We're talking today about climate change because obviously Hawaii is on fire at the moment, which, on a list of places that you expect to go on fire, you might say California, it's very dry. Australia, it's very dry. Maybe the pine barrens of Canada, if they have a freakishly hot summer. Not Hawaii. Hawaii is a wet, tropical paradise island. It's the most southerly of all US states. It's quite close to the equator. In the same way that Alaska is near the Arctic Circle. Now, last week we saw glacial melt take out a house. And I don't know if you've seen the whole video of this, but it actually takes out the trees in front of the house. There's a good 50 to 100 meters of land between the house and the river. That is obviously, this torrent is coming down past this home, and it takes out all the trees, and then it takes out this house itself. And imagine just for a second how horrible that would be if that was your house and you had spent years making it look nice, renovating it, doing all this stuff. Imagine losing that and having to watch that disappear before your very eyes. Well, that's something that the people of Hawaii, of Maui Island in Hawaii, where now over 50 people are dead. There's 1,000 people missing. So this could be the biggest climate catastrophe death toll so far in proceedings, because, we keep talking about this being the hottest summer on record. Yeah, but it's also the coolest summer compared to the ones that we're going to be seeing coming in future years. And the fault of all this lies with the fossil fuel companies. Yes, also politicians, but it's the fossil fuel companies who have bought the politicians. It's the fossil fuel companies that have lobbied people like Rishi Sunak, the richest prime minister in history, to open over 100 new licenses. Why would they do that? Why would they do that? 100 new licenses in the North Sea. Why are they so desperate to drill and dig out the filthiest fuel imaginable and burn it as quickly as possible? Well, I'll tell you why. Because the fossil fuel companies, Exxon Mobil, Shell, Chevron, all this lot, they are absolutely crapping themselves over litigation, lawsuits. Now, back in May this year, there was a lawsuit brought against Shell. It was brought against Shell by Shell shareholders, easy for you to say, who actually, it was a group who bought shares in Shell so they could take the directors to court for not doing anything about climate change. Unfortunately, that fell at the first hurdle. However, it could be very, very likely to be the first of many. Then in June this year, there was a lawsuit launched against about 31 different fossil fuel companies, including Exxon Mobil and Chevron and Shell. And this was launched by one county in Oregon. So the suit was put in Portland, which is the capital of Oregon. And this was to do with specifically the 2021 heat dome that was over the United States and the damage that it caused. And they were seeking over $50 billion from those companies. Now, I don't know if that lawsuit's going to go ahead. I don't know if it's going to win, but I can see it being the first of many because, and here's the thing, fossil fuel companies knew that climate change would happen if they continued to pump CO2 into the atmosphere at the levels that they do. If they continue to drill this energy out of the ground and then put the energy on the ground, then burn the energy, those vapors, the gas, the emissions, the CO2 would have to go somewhere. It goes into the atmosphere. And they have managed to take the energy from over 25 billion, the equivalent of 25 billion nuclear explosions. Hate it when they say, oh, it's only 1%. 1% is not going to kill anyone. It's not 1%. It's 1% over the whole planet. It's not 1% in the room. It's not like just turning down the thermostat by 1 degree and not really noticing it. Or turning it off, I suppose. This is a monumental geo-terraforming event. and maybe terror forming, in fact, as in the war on terror or terrorism. This is what they've done. So these fossil fuel companies knew that this would happen. They knew about it in the 1970s, the 70s. And it wasn't until the late 80s that NASA confirmed what the oil companies already knew. By then, the oil companies all had, the fossil fuel companies, they all had their get out of jail free card, which they were going to play and play very, very effectively. These companies at the time were the richest organizations in the world. And they're still pretty rich. I mean, nowhere near as rich as Apple these days, but that's how things go. So these fossil fuel companies had all this money and they paid for political lobbyists. They paid for advertising on TV. They paid for people to go on TV and start disparaging the NASA data that had come in to say, there is way more CO2 in the atmosphere now than there was 200 years ago, or 10,000 years ago, or 100,000 years ago, or we might be going back a few million years now at this point. We're getting up to a point where it might get up to 450 parts per million of CO2 into the atmosphere. It is relentless. It is relentless. And so they had learnt the lessons, these fossil fuel companies had learnt the lessons from the tobacco industry, which knew that tobacco was bad for you. They knew that tobacco was bad for you back in the goddamn Elizabethan age, not Elizabeth II, Elizabeth I. If you read the short stories by Arthur Conan Doyle, the Sherlock Holmes stories, there is a few times in which Watson says, when he's saying, hey, stay away from that opium, stay away from that heroin, Sherlock, he says, you shouldn't smoke, it's bad for you. Now, don't forget, Dr. Watson is a doctor. He's a medical doctor who served in Afghanistan, funnily enough. And he knows what he's talking about. It's bad for you. Now, they didn't have the proof. So up to that point, they were saying, onto the 1950s, they were saying, oh, well, we can't prove that it's bad for you. It's probably bad for you. I mean, there were experiences of people in a building. The building was on fire and they died. There was they weren't burnt. They weren't burnt in the fire. Why did they die? Because of smoke inhalation. Because smoke is bad for you. It's toxic. It's also radioactive. Interestingly enough, any smokers who are still out there who have survived the cull over the last few years, the great vaping cull of the 2010s, for the original smokers, some of whom had to sit next to us while we were eating in Greece because that's what smokers do. Anyway, they until the 1950s, they couldn't prove there was a link between heart disease, cancer, and smoking. In the 1950s, they could. Developments with medicine, etc. And then the tobacco companies went on a very aggressive marketing, advertising campaign and talked about smoking being freedom. They paid film companies to ensure that there were people smoking in every scene in a goddamn film. You look at now at films that were made in the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s, and it's shocking to a modern viewer just how many people light up for no reason whatsoever. That in Aliens, she's sitting there with a cigarette that she's obviously not smoking because it's got a big ash line on it, and it's like, I think isn't the filter really big? Is that Aliens or the filters? Because that's the future. This is set 100 years in the future. The tobacco companies, these massive multinational cancer-creating organizations, these we've got British American Tobacco and Philip Morris and other evil entities who are doing things at the moment like suing the government of some West African governments like Sierra Leone for putting warning labels on packages of cigarettes saying these are bad for you. Trying to stymie developing nations into the governments of developing nations into not delivering that health message to people that this is bad. You go to Indonesia, you see children smoking. Like everyone smokes in Indonesia. Well, last time I went, it might all be vaping now. I don't know. Disposable vapes. Let's talk about that another day. But the oil companies looked at what the tobacco companies did and they went, oh yeah, we can do that. We'll do exactly the same thing. And so they did. They paid for people to go on TV and say, well, this expert says this, but the evidence isn't all there. And we've got this one report out of 10,000 that says it might not happen. And, scientists hasn't been right about everything. They used to think the world was flat. No, we didn't. We never thought that the world was flat. We just did. It never occurred to us that the world might be flat until now. Now we have the Flat Earth Society. The ancient Greeks completely sussed it and knew it was round. I can't stress this enough. Christopher Columbus knew the world was round. If he thought that he was going to sail three Spanish ships off the edge of the world, do you think Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand would have given him a goddamn boat? No, they wouldn't. They wouldn't have given him one, never mind three, to sail off the end of the world. No, he wanted to get to the Indies the other way, across the Atlantic Ocean, which no one had done before. Well, we had, but we just didn't know about it. I think Erik the Viking got over there in about 800 AD, was it? Anyway, so now the oil companies, we've got a reckoning coming, because you have got this immovable object, which is the law. And people who want money. People like money. And they're going to see these cases going before the court and say, hang on, we just had a natural disaster. We'll have a piece of that. We'll sue Exxon. We'll sue Exxon Mobil. We'll sue Shell. We'll sue BP. Yeah, let's sue them. Let's sue them in court. And here's the thing. This lawsuit that's been brought in Portland, in Oregon, is representing one county. One county in one state in America. There are 50 states. There are 3,142 counties of the 50 states in America. So, little maths on top of your head. 50 billion times 3,142 comes out at not exactly, but around $157 trillion. Trillion with a T. That's way more than the gross world product. You know, we talk about GDP, put all the GDPs together, becomes the gross world product. That's about 90 for a year. So this is how much these companies could get done for, theoretically. And that's just in the United States of America. And America is not the world. And then you've got jurisdictions all over the world where these companies operate and have operated. And these natural disasters are absolutely 100%, no doubt about it, caused by climate change. You can talk about the El Nino effect and the El Niño effect. Yeah, they've been exacerbated by climate change. If it wasn't for climate change, we wouldn't be having wildfires in a wet, humid, tropical environment like Hawaii, in which over 50 people are now dead, confirmed, and 1,000 people are missing. It wouldn't happen. And we can prove it with science. And also, if you can prove it with science, you can prove it in a court of law. Now, obviously, these fossil fuel companies are going to throw absolutely everything. They're going to throw the kitchen sink at fighting these lawsuits. But there's going to be a point where they're just going to have to cut their losses and run. And that, my friends, is why, knowing that there's not that much oil that we can still reach in the world, they are still absolutely desperate to get as much out of the ground as they can before all these companies go bankrupt, which they will. I mean, they have to. It's a certainty. It's an absolute certainty because the law. Because if people smell a way of making $50 billion for their county, they're going to take it. And if it's only going to cost X amount to take into court, you may as well. You may as well buy a lottery ticket because you're not going to win otherwise, eh? $50 billion a county. And there's only over 3,000 counties in America. And that's just one country. So, do the math. As the Americans say, do the maths, as we say, because it's plural, mathematics. It's not just one thing. Anyway, right. I'm going to just jump into the chat for a moment now that my little opening soliloquy is over. I'm going to just say hello. Jan Wallace is there from France. Hope you had a good holiday. Yes, we went to Crete. Well, we went to Athens, and because, I just can't do the things the easy way, we then got the overnight boat to the ferry to Crete. And we had a week in Crete. Going to Knossos Palace and also to the birthplace of Zeus, which is a cave near this amazing plateau in eastern Crete, which was fantastic. Although we were there with the kids, and something you got to understand about kids, most kids aren't like me when I was a kid, because I hated the beach, I hated hanging around. A little combination here of being ginger, probably having ADHD, My idea of hell is sizzling on a hot beach, getting skin cancer and sunburnt, sitting there. I just can't in the glaring heat. I mean, don't get me wrong. If I'm somewhere tropical, I'm on a between two hammocks, between two palm trees on a hammock, between two other hammocks. I don't know what's happening with my hammock party here. Reading a copy of Hemingway while sipping on ice cold beer. That sounds good to me. But sitting on the beach cooking, yeah. But kids, slightly different. You try and drag them around ancient sites, they may not be as interested in thousands of pieces of pottery like you might be interested in, or I might be interested. I don't know. So we went to the Crete Museum in Heraklion, which was fascinating. And also, when we were in Athens, we went both to the Parthenon and some of the other sites in Athens and the Acropolis, which is the big hill, and it's got all the ancient sites on. But also, I went to the Museum of the Acropolis, which opened in 2009. So last time I was in Athens, about 19 years ago, it didn't exist. There wasn't a museum of the Acropolis, but it wasn't quite as set out as this one was. Now, I've made a video specifically targeting the fact that the Pantheon marbles were stolen by Lord Elgin in 1801. He bought them off the Turks, who had invaded Greece at the time. And I genuinely feel like they should be given back. So I've made a video about that, and I'll be editing that hopefully today, this morning. My first job back here in sunny Durham. And then at 1 o'clock today, I'm going to be meeting up again with Phil. Yay, Phil Morehouse will be here with me at 1 o'clock for the agenda this week, a roundup of British politics for the week. Obviously, I'm talking a little bit more about international politics today. So look out for them. And tonight, we should be doing an episode of the Labour Social at 9 o'clock. So also watch out for that as well. Obviously, if we do more than 2 live streams a day, the third one doesn't necessarily notify you. But if you're not a subscriber yet, please subscribe. Then you can comment. And also, please tap the bell notification icon, so you get to watch the live shows going out live. So we've got Lofty the Softy in the chat, we've got David, we've got Daily Blase, we've got Jupe, we've got number 3 there, we've got Richard, we've got Lee Cruz, we've got Hannah Mad Murdoch, we've got Conservator. Good morning from Davy Moo, the tiredest of all humans from Politically Enraged. Hi, Davy Moo. Greenpeace US is totally misinformed about Bitcoin. Reminds me of the polemic surrounding the skull of Satoshi sculpture, when the author of the sculpture discovered that Bitcoin is carbon negative. Okay, Andre, I'm not going to go into Bitcoin at the moment because I don't want to give any more advertising to that obvious gambling pyramid scheme, tomfoolery. But as far as I'm aware, for the last few years, people have been spending hundreds, thousands, millions of dollars collectively around the world on energy for server farms that are mining Bitcoin and other ether chips, other chips that don't only exist in the ether. The idea being that it's like a gambling process where it's like a horse race, and one server's got to find some mathematical problem which costs a lot of energy to work out, and some kind of data server farm in Chile or in northern China or somewhere, and it's destroying the planet, as well as being a total rip-off and being gambling. It's just gambling. I mean, obviously, with gambling, some people win. Some people have been playing the National Lottery in the UK now for, get this, 30 years. Nearly 30 years, the National Lottery has been going in the UK, and they haven't won yet. It's funny that. It's almost as though the odds are stacked against you. So most people have lost, over that period, thousands and thousands of pounds. There you go. Anyway, The Guardian published a story earlier this year that showed that Exxon predicted climate change in 1971. Yeah, Ian, absolutely. That's what I'm talking about. They knew about it. And then they spent all this money telling people it wasn't true. Spreading disinformation, spreading propaganda, spreading lies. That's actionable. That is actionable in many, many jurisdictions around the world. And goddamn, it should be. I want to see Nigeria, the Nigerian government, suing the living crap out of the fossil fuel companies for destroying the Niger Delta with all the oil leaks that they have for the oil pipe work that is coming out from the from the sea, where they have these oil platforms on the sea. It's painful. It's really painful what these oil companies have been allowed to get away with. But this could be our way out. The law could help us. I'm just going to scroll down a second here because Johnny Copperhead has put a £5 super chat in. If you want me to read your message, make it a super chat. Just moved to New York. Lovely. Bob Jenrick is my new MP. Not lovely. Oh dearie me. I'm sorry about that. Sorry about having Bob degenerate. But hopefully he'll be out on his ear in the next election. Let's see if we can do something about that. Right, who else have we got in the chat? If anyone wants to know more, they can recommend The Merchants of Doubt by Eric Conway and Naomi Oreskes. Yeah, I've heard of The Merchants of Doubt. I might put that on my reading list. I just finished Empire Land, which is a very interesting read about the British Empire, which might come into some of the things I talk about when I'm talking about things like the return of the Parthenon marbles, etc. Because we just did go around the world looting things. It's a topic for another day. Let's try and focus on climate change and the fact that things are on fire in America, in Hawaii, which shouldn't really be part of America, but it is. Anyone want to have a look at the newspapers, though? What the newspapers are spouting out today? Let's have a look at the papers. We've got the Times here. The strike's putting the NHS to the brink. Obviously, they want to put the blame on the doctors. And there's a rush of migrants crossing this channel, takes channel total past 100,000. This is not a made-up figure, but this is over 5 years. They've tried to make it look worse than it really is. It's about 20,000 a year, which is bad, but it's not like, that bad. And then we've got on the Daily Telegraph here, the 1 billion cost of junior doctors strikes. Obviously, again, trying to put the blame onto the doctors. It's one thing when you try and blame, I don't know, coal miners or rail workers for all the ills of the world, or asylum seekers for that matter. But they're blaming doctors now as well. The NHS is failing because of the doctors, not because of the people in charge of this country for the last 13 years. And then obviously the Daily Express is obsessed with the small boats there, the fears of surge in small boats. And they actually have the 100,000 in 5 years. So that's 20,000 a year. Isn't that many? I mean, seriously, you do know that Germany took in 1 million refugees back in, 2016? Yeah. And the German economy is not suffered as bad as ours has over the last few years. I know it's not great, but striking doctors are just harming patients. That's from the Daily Heil, obviously. Guess who had Shell shares? So this is, again, another Tory corruption thing. It was about Therese Villiers, who was the Secretary of State for the Environment. And she had £70,000. That's over double the national average wage. And she had that in shares in an oil company. There you go. And the PM will go down in history for failing on the climate. This is Greenpeace. This is talking about the response to the fact that they made his house, they covered it in black. One of his houses, one of his 11 houses, I think he's got 11 houses. They covered it in black tarpaulin or something, and or black sheet. And apparently, as a response to that, Rishi Sunak has gone out and said, right, we've got to crush the people who are trying to save the planet. They're the bad guys, not us. And then obviously this horrible picture of which I've used on my video thumbnail today, which is dozens dead as wildfires engulf Hawaiian town. Again, just absolutely horrific scenes, people running into the beach, running into the sea to try and escape the flames. So many historical sites just destroyed, now gone forever. They were made of wood. There's entire towns that have been leveled, absolutely razed to the ground. And this has happened because of oil companies. We could have had electric cars a long time ago. We could have moved to solar power and wind turbines and, even nuclear fusion, if you want to look that far into the future. But we didn't, because we invested incredibly heavily and subsidized oil companies rather than putting the money into the technology required to make solar panels really effective, to make lithium batteries that lasted, for ages, so you could do over 200 miles in an SUV, electric SUV. The falling behind of technology for green matters is a crime. It's another crime against humanity. And I'll make myself big before I talk about this a bit more, but I want to come back to this because I think that it might actually also signify problems for the government that's in charge at the moment, and whether we could bring them to court for knowing about climate change and doing nothing about it. In fact, exacerbating the problem and creating more droughts, more incredibly hot days over 40 degrees in the UK last summer, more flooding, more damage, more erosion around the sea levels rising. You know, it's all there. It's all there to play for. The Daily Star's got a story about people going to Belgium. A very boring headline. And the Eye's leading with the mortgage rates war begins as 13 lenders cut prices. Yeah, they're cutting prices, but not by a lot, I'm afraid. And I'm going to just, do you know what? I want to go back to the other screen, but I know what's going to happen. I know what you're going to do. I did it. It did it. I knew it was going to do that. Sorry. I forgot to automatically start the morning brew intro thing. I meant to turn that off. Right. Okay. I work with many chain smokers, says Gary Arnold. Oh, God, it's painful. You know, like someone's next to you in a cafe and they're smoking, and the smoke is disgusting and it's blowing your way, because obviously it's like a cat. You know, if you don't like cats, the cat will come to you. If you don't like smoking, the smoke will come to you. And then you think, oh, well, they're not going to smoke for long. And then they light up another one. You're like, anyone who wants to know more, I've read that one. Tell me someone is finally going to bring class action against the fossil fuel companies. If not, I volunteer to start off, from Christina. Yeah, well, this is the hope. This is the hope that there will be loads more of these class action lawsuits brought against oil companies, because this has to happen. This literally has to happen, because this is the only way we're going to destroy them. We don't have the money. We don't have the power. We're not one of the 4 individual billionaires that own 99% of the British media. We're not those people. What have we got? Well, we've got the law. And the law says that you can't destroy the lives of millions of people. You can't literally kill people because of something that your company did. If it was a manufacturing plant that blew up and killed people in the surrounding areas or flooded their homes with toxic sludge, the owners of that factory should go to jail, right? I mean, they wouldn't, because we live in a society in which if you're rich, you can get away with murder. See Donald Trump in America, who's still not in jail for some reason. They said, right, if you talk about this case, then we're going to hold you in contempt of court. Go on then. Hold him in contempt. Put him in jail now. He's already done enough to justify. If it was anyone else, if you got arrested for speeding and drunk driving, let's say, not so speeding, but drunk driving, quite a serious offence, and then you were told by the judge not to go on social media and bitch about it, essentially, or threaten the people on your jury. If you were left in your own recognizance up till the trial date, you weren't being held until the trial, which sometimes happens. You say, the jury, I'm going to kill every one of them when I get my hands on them if they vote against me. That is pretty, that's pretty contemptuous. That's pretty contempt of Parliament. Contempt of Parliament. That's this country. Contempt of court, isn't it? I don't understand why he's not in jail. I don't understand why he's not in jail right now. And the only reason I can really see is because he's rich. Which is another thing why everything's stacked against you if you haven't got much money. Like even bail. If you're a billionaire and your bail is set to $1 million, pay that. Pay that. That's fine. But the tiny amount of the money I've got. It's like having £1,000 and having to pay £1 for your freedom. You'd be like, oh, okay then. Whereas £1 million to the rest of us is a lot of money. And I know that your bond is set, your bail is set, sorry, it's a level that reflects how much money you have access to, generally speaking. But also, generally speaking, there is a level that they can't really put it to because it will be too high, and it's not a lot of these people's amassed fortunes, unfortunately. The Tories believe you either make rules or obey rules, but not both. That explains everything they do, from Brexit to Partygate to the ECHR. Well, they're threatening to pull out the ECHR, which is painful as well. Just the stupidity. It burns. Wildfires is a weird one to prove, isn't it? I mean, there's always been wildfires. We had lots in the 90s and 2000 in Portugal. Yeah, but Portugal is way north of the Tropic of Cancer. I mean, the islands of Hawaii are well in the tropics. I mean, they are wet islands. They have loads and loads of rain. I mean, they're pretty far south. I mean, there's about sort of far south of central Mexico, and which is obviously quite jungly. Obviously, northern Mexico, quite arid and dry, and you get that. You get that anywhere you've got like the line of Cancer or the line of Capricorn. You tend to get those really dry areas. But then as you get close to the equator, it gets more and more tropical, more and more green. That's where the Amazon rainforest is. That's where the rainforests of Africa are. That's where the Borneo rainforest is. It's literally on the equator, and it's wet. And the idea of having a forest fire somewhere that wet is just no. And also, if you look at somewhere like Australia, which is a dry, arid environment for most of it, I mean, not all of it, go down to Victoria, it rains every day. But the fires that you can have there are part of the natural cycle of the environment in Australia. Some of the trees have developed so they can only germinate if they've been through fire. And because Aboriginals, and I'm going to go off a massive tangent here about the disgraceful way that the British treated Aboriginal Australians over the years. But they would set fires in certain areas to burn off at particular times of the year when they knew that they could control it. And that would burn all the dry stuff off the ground. The animals would be able to have somewhere to go get out and be safe. Whereas idiot European, dickhead Whitey over here, we go over there and say, oh, we don't want any fires. Fires are bad. Let's not have any fires. And what happens is all this dry stuff builds up on the ground, all this bracken and stuff builds up on the ground for years and years, and then it's a tinderbox once you have a few days of absolute intense heat. There's not much moisture in the air, and you have strong winds, wildfire. But like I say, that's part of the ecosystem of Australia. It's manageable. The Australian Aboriginals managed it for 50,000 years, and then we turned up and destroyed it, their entire cycle of life. Story for another time. But the point being that it's very, very, very unusual to see a fire somewhere that tropical. Over in Panama, where I have my home. I don't actually have a home in the UK. I'm kind of a bit of a tramp over here. I've given up ever trying to dream of owning my own home in this stupid country. But where Ginger Island is technically a rainforest. They have over 3 meters of rain a year. 3 meters, but very, very susceptible to climate change. So we could be seeing fires there in the future, thanks to climate change, thanks to the fossil fuel companies and the people who work for them and the people who do their sinister bidding, the lobbyists and the MPs that they have in their pockets all over the world, and politicians they have in their pockets. Imagine having 70,000 spare cash you just buy shares with. Indeed. Most of the wars in my life have been for oil companies. History is going to judge us very badly. That's very true, Jez Hunt. There was a war between Paraguay and Bolivia. You won't believe this. Look it up. It happened about 100 years ago. A bit over 100 years ago. They had a war. Was it 100? Was it 100 years? Was it 1930? Someone look it up. Have a look at the Paraguay-Bolivia war. It was about oil. It was about these oil lands. They thought there was going to be oil there. And it was on the border, the Badlands between Paraguay and Bolivia. They had a war, and each side of the war, the two sides of the war were being funded by two rival petrochemical companies. And loads of people died. And I think Paraguay won. And they got this territory that they wanted off Bolivia. It was contested with Bolivia. And then they drilled there and they found there was no oil. So that happened. Starting again, Graham, says Frank. Okay, I've heard some good news. Scientists have invented a new superconductor that operates at room temperature. Before they had to cool it down to minus 140 degrees C. Sorry, Duke. Sorry to burst your bubble, but it's not true. Sorry, fake news. Tim Ballum says, I just had the gas to the house capped at an induction hob. Only took a year to supply the house unlooped. Oh my God. So it sounds like a similar situation to Erin Brockovich, Graham. Well, Howling Mad Murdoch, it very well could be. But it's not local. Like, if you talk about the Blopel incident in India in the 1980s, which killed thousands of people in the surrounding area and caused all kinds of horrific injuries to people. And it was a chemical explosion that happened in Blopel. It was Union Carbide, I think, that ran the company, and there was attempts to sue them for their negligence for causing this to happen, but it didn't really get anywhere. But I don't know if I don't feel like the Indian judicial system might not be quite as robust as the American system or the British system. I don't know. I think it's all probably just different levels of corruption because of politicians who are in the pocket of oil companies and have been for over 100 years now. Some very old politicians out there. Don Dudat says, 12 years ago, I bought 10 solar panels, 4 batteries, 2 charge controllers, and 2 wind turbines, about 7K. Didn't think it would pay for itself for decades, but already has free electric now, says Don. Yeah. Well, that's what we had on the island, on Ginger Island, for anyone who joined us a couple of years ago when me and all shorts that Marcus kept. We went over to Ginger Islands for a few weeks, a couple of months actually, to fix the place up. And the solar panels we got were just insanely cheap. The solar controllers we got were dead cheap. And yeah, we just bodged it all together and it works. And it's worked now for nearly 2 years fantastically well. So yeah, it can be done. It is being done around the world, even in the UK. But also, I'll do an episode next week. I might do a moment's truth, but I'd like to talk to you guys about it, ladies as well, about electric cars, the future of transport in the UK and how we're going to work it. Because I had a little bit of an epiphany while I was away on holiday, and I'm going to wrap it up soon because I realise I'm going over the time a little bit. But I really, 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 really hate cars. I just hate them. I absolutely hate them. I hate everything about them. I hate them. You know these people who call themselves petrol heads, go around razzing in really loud cars? Yeah, I'm the opposite of that. And before you start thinking of me of some lily-livered, metropolitan elite, I grew up working in my dad's garage. I mean, his shop in which he sold carburetors. Get a better carburetor. Great name for a shop. My dad's shop. So every Saturday of my, young life, from when I was 11 till when I finished school at 18, and while my friends were all off down the match, I would be at my dad's shop fixing, drilling manifolds and making bloody gasket kits and working with carburation systems and stuff and putting Nicky carburetors, Delauto, Weber, Solex carburetors together, missing out bolts and getting shouted at. The point being, I grew up in that kind of environment where we watched the Grand Prix every other Sunday. My dad was a motor racer. He still is honorary president of Aintree Circuit Club in Liverpool. Aintree was where they held the British Grand Prix for a few years in the 1950s and 60s before it moved permanently to where it is now in Silverstone. It was in Brands Hatch for a few years, I think, in the 70s, but now it's permanently at Silverstone. So it's not like I don't get it. It's not like I don't understand why people love cars so much, but I absolutely hate them. I think they've destroyed everything good. And I'm going to talk a bit more about that next week, but I'd like you to join me in this conversation that we're going to have. Okay, so I'll be back at 1:00 to talk specifically about British politics with Phil Morehouse for the agenda this week. So please join us for that. And please join us for the 9:00 show, the Labour Social, tonight at 9:00. Grab your beers, grab your wines, grab your cups of tea, and let's get into it. And hopefully we'll try and make it a little less sweary than it was last time. It did descend into chaos the last show. I'll try and rein it in a little bit this time. Bernie says, I hate cars too. Thank you, Bernie, for agreeing with me. Cars suck. questionable absent sanity has put £5 in the super chat. Thank you. Woohoo! You are not a lead head. No, I'm certainly not a lead head or a petrol head or any of that nonsense. Tolkien always said cars was one of the greatest evils in the world. Called it the infernal combustion engine. I still have my hardback copy of Mr. Bliss by J.R.R. Tolkien, which is the first Tolkien book I ever read at a tender age, and it still has some of my drawings that I decided to do in it, which probably has reduced the value quite a lot with a biro when I was 5. But yes, in that, Mr. Bliss buys a motor car and causes carnage with his motor car. So, me, old Johnny Tolk. We were singing from the same hymn sheet, I fear. Okay, so thanks very much for watching. If you want to head over to the Discord server, I'll be over there in a moment doing the James O'Brien listening along. So we'll chat within the breaks, and then at 12 o'clock we'll be back on here for the agenda. Until then, thanks for watching. Hello, good evening, welcome, and goodbye.